So, a very warm welcome to this local democracy talk. We're going to be talking about local democracy in post-conflict context, and this will be based on the research done by Hanna Leonardsson and Jean-Bosco Habyarimana on the County ICLD. And based on this, we'll be going through a bit of a discussion on connecting research and practice and on participation in local decision-making and how that is influenced by and influencing conflict dynamics in a post-conflict context. So first, to introduce the speakers today, we have Jean-Bosco Habyarimana, who is affiliated with the University of Rwanda and the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. And his areas of research include local and non-state initiatives for sustainable development, democratization, electoral violence, and peace building. Now I have somebody sharing the screen. I think, Kyalo, can you wait a bit with sharing your screen? And stop sharing for now. Thank you. So the other researcher today is Hanna Leonardsson, who is a senior lecturer in global studies at the University of Gothenburg. And her areas of research include local peace building and local governance, politics of peace building, sustainable societal transitions, and vertical entanglements of the local. And last but not least, I have a local government representative here. We're honored to have Augustine Kyalo Mutiso, who is the Director of Citizen Engagement in the county government in Machakos. He is the outgoing Director of Citizen Engagement in the county government, passionate about participatory planning, inclusivity, and good governance, and also an alumni of ICLD's ITP program on inclusive local governance. So with that, I'm going to hand right over for a presentation. First, we're going to hear the results of the research done during the last few years. And from there on, we're going to hear some reflections from a local government that took part in the research. And then we'll head to some discussion points after that. And I'll invite all of you to share your reflections and questions in the end. We hope that this can be an active discussion where you feel free and open to invite any thoughts or questions you have. And we have about an hour to talk to each other. So yeah, let's get started. And I give the floor right away to Hanna and Jean-Bosco. Very welcome.
Thank you very much. And let me share my screen. So thank you very much for inviting us to this local democracy talk called The Double-Edged Sword of Participation in Post-Conflict Societies. The project that we have performed is called Whose Voice Matters for What? And it was an ICLD funded research project funded initially in, December 2019. So we got started in 2020. It's been COVID ridden. So we've had some complications because of COVID and the pandemic, but we are very happy that we have late last year, everything has been finalized and our research reports have been published. We've also, in the summer last year, we went to Kenya to present our results to some county governments, one of them being Machakos. So I'm really happy to see you again here, Kyalo, and meet you again. So the involved researchers are, as Clara was saying, myself, Hanna Leonardsson, and Jean-Bosco Habyarimana. I also want to emphasize that we had the help of local assistants. We had Tom and Boya and Edward Japaso in Kenya, and we had Ali Melhem in Lebanon. And they were crucial in performing this research, particularly because of COVID and performing research during the pandemic. So what we did as part of the research project was to do structured interviews, or our assistants performed structured interviews with municipal councillors, or actually also county councillors, so municipalities in Lebanon and county governments in Kenya, and civil society actors. And we combined that with semi-structured interviews that both me and Jean-Bosco had performed before, in Lebanon and Kenya as part of both of our PhD projects, where my PhD is on local peace building in Lebanon, and Jean-Bosco had a similar theme in Kenya. So we had extensive material from before that informed our research, and then added on some additional structured interviews to compare the cases. What the project aimed at was to understand how local participation actually works in post-conflict contexts. So, but before we get to our results, I would like to take you on a bit of a tour of why does local participation matter in post-conflict contexts, and what is the idea behind looking at local participation for conflict resolution, for peace or peace building. And the kind of background context then that we're in is that we've had the third wave of democratization, 1990s, a lot of countries democratizing in Africa, but also other parts of the world. And they've been adopting multi-party democracy, but it's been struggling to consolidate. And we've also had a few conflicts related to democracy or other issues. The value of local inclusion and participation for democracy has been well established, and there's been an argument, or there is an argument saying that decentralization or localizing democracy is really important for increasing inclusion and participation. But we also know that in post-conflict societies, participation and inclusion is still dominated by conflictual identities, which could be, religious identities or ethnic identities, if those were the ones part of conflicts in the past. We also know that in post-conflict societies, elites often use decentralized entities or decentralization to increase their own control over state institutions and resources. So there's kind of two conflicting ideas here. One is for local democracy to be very beneficial and work for local participation and even conflict resolution at the local level. And the other one is that, well, does it really work like that? So what we wanted to look at was, so whose voice actually matters in local decision making, looking at the how rather than the what. The arguments that we depart from theoretically are that local governments improve participation by opening up participatory forums closer to the people. So moving democracy closer to the people, moving the possibilities to have arenas for inclusion and participation. We also depart from the key idea that participation is important, but it needs to be connected to influence. So it's not enough to participate. It's not enough to sit in a meeting. You need to, for a participant to have, a participant needs to have a say in the ideas or the points being discussed in the meeting. But we also depart from the kind of conflicting idea or notion that this local participation is influenced by national and local divides, and especially in post-conflict contexts. What we set up to do was a comparative study between Kenya and Lebanon. And we chose Kenya and Lebanon because they are both post-conflict countries, Lebanon having had a civil war for 15 years between 1975 and 1989, Kenya being having had recurring cycles of violence, especially in relation to elections. Not so much in the past national elections, but previously in 2007 and so on. But these countries are also different. So Kenya has gone through a decentralization reform. So very clearly devolving power from the national to county governments. Part of that as a tool to promote conflict management. Lebanon has the idea of decentralization reform in its peace agreement from '89, but it has not yet been implemented. So even though they have local elections, devolution of power has not yet been implemented. So our findings then, based on these assumptions and based on our previous interviews, but also the structured interviews that we performed as part of this project, we found that there are possibilities to participate, but those possibilities exist more for some than for others. The difference between Kenya's decentralized system and Lebanon's centralized system is that Kenya actually has more forums for participation. So what we're seeing there is that through the constitutional reform, forums have been opened up, which in itself is one step towards more local inclusion and local ownership, of course. What our results also show is that inequalities equally exist among both countries. So both in Kenya and Lebanon, we find that, for example, women and men do not participate equally. If we look at the inclusion of youth, it is not considered being equal as in relation to other groups. And we also find that if we're looking at the particular divides that exist in relation to post-conflict settings, different communities do not participate equally. We also find that inclusion and the ability to influence local decision making depends on personal status. We ask questions about, for example, education, economic situation, and connections to local leaders. And it's very clear, even though education and economic situation also matter, connections to local leaders are a key ingredient in being able to influence local decision making. One of our interviewees claimed that, as in the quote that's on the slide, he says that I know the needs of my community and I have to make sure these elected leaders take care of our needs. I have a good connection with the member of county assembly, and as you can see, the sub-county commissioner opens the door for me anytime. So the connections you have are really important in being able to put forward the needs of certain communities. So furthermore, we also found that local decision-making bodies are influenced by national dividing lines. So who you are and what's your personal status is not only in relation to the local context. It's very much influenced by whether you're connected to both the local and the national. So national dividing lines play a role in who gets access locally. One quote from Lebanon, we have a civil society actor saying that on the ground, he, and then that's the mayor, is doing a good work together with the civil society, a well-selected municipal council. But in the end, they are representing a certain political party. And this goes to the situation of, well, yes, there's a representation and inclusion of civil society actors in the work they're doing locally, but what is actually being done is very much influenced by who they're connected to nationally and who's in power nationally. Similarly, one of our interviews in Kenya said that, of course, if you are connected to important people, you get respected and listened to. People listen to us because we bring their queries to higher officers and they see that solutions come. So even though there's a decentralized system in Kenya, we can still see that the connection to the national is really important. and plays an important role in who has influence locally, but also what is being implemented in the local arena. So, but how does this become local participation as a double-edged sword? And on one hand, we can see that it creates challenges for democratization on the local level. If local connections, personal status, and connections to the national matter, then local democracy also becomes less transparent. It creates difficulties for accountability. So having relationships and connections as part of how you're influencing, of course, it becomes less transparent, and it becomes less. It removes responsibility from the kind of traditional ways of exercising accountability that we're seeing in democracy. So if you're not, if you want to hold leaders accountable, then you do that by voting them out in the next election. But everything is more obscure if things happen through relationships. At the same time, we also see that this might actually create possibilities for equity. And when I talk about equity, I'm not talking about equality as in equal possibilities for everyone, no matter of who you are. I'm talking about tools and possibilities for people who might not have the same advantage as others to also have influence. We see this, for example, in Lebanon, where female municipal councillors have told me that, well, I mean, I have the possibility of making women's voices heard in the local arena. So women might actually use other avenues for influence because they rely on the personal status of a particular woman, for example. So if treated right and adjusted to local power dynamics, this can actually be a tool for inclusion and participation. So it is a double-edged sword. It is something that we also both have to be cautious about, and we have to realize the difficulties it carries with it. But there might also be some possibilities in a post-conflict context where identities and who you are and personal status matters for who has influence. So, just to end up with our recommendations, we would say that there's a need to pay attention to the inclusion of those usually not heard. So still understanding local power dynamics, understanding who is included and who is not, is necessary to broaden participation and inclusion. We also say that there's a need to transparently acknowledge different voices included in the national versus different local arenas. And these are things that most local people know about. They are aware of their local political influences. They are aware of power relations. But it might be things that are a little bit difficult to talk about because it borders on issues of corruption. It borders on issues of who's included and who's not. And it borders on, in Lebanon, people would say this is politics and we don't want to talk about it. But I think we really need to talk about politics. We need to talk about how different politics influence whose voice is included. And then, as a final note, we also say that we need to pay attention to alternative avenues for influence and how less influential actors use these avenues for influencing local decision making. So not just saying that, well, influence through relationships is wrong. We need to actually look at how this works and for whom. that's what I had for our presentation. So I will leave the word to Clara again, and we look forward to the seminar.
Thank you very much, Hanna. It's been very interesting to listen to this, and I think we have a great background now to move on to hear from Machakos County government to get the policy perspective on this. And Kyalo, I know that you were part of the research when this was being done in Kenya, so it will be very interesting to hear your perspective. Please have the mic.
Let me try to share my presentation, but it tells me my browser is preventing me. I don't know why my browser should be preventing me from sharing. Is it on your side?
We see nothing.
It's telling me that the browser is preventing me from sharing. Let me see. Has Anne already stopped sharing? Because it shows only one person should be able to share.
Yes, but Anna, stop sharing. Alternatively, I can share it from mine.
Just try to share it from yours. I see. Thank you.
And then you just tell me when to change.
So you're going to control it for me from that side?
I think if this is easier for you, then we'll do this, and you just tell me when to change the slide. Is that all right?
Exactly. I'll do.
Thank you.
So I was part of the team that Hanna and Bosco visited. I hosted them in Machakos in one of their presentations, and we were grateful to have them there. Unfortunately, it was a bad day for us that day. They come on a day when we lost one of us. We lost my deputy director at that time. On the same that day when we were actually meeting. May her soul rest in peace. So I'm going to give a case in Machakos and generally about county governments in Kenya, because we have a forum we have been sharing so much. And what Anne and Bosco have presented is exactly the scenario in the country. And I'm going to now to share as a user, as an insider, on what we're trying to do to mitigate some of these things. So maybe we go to the next screen, Clara. So on the background, I would want to say that Kenya for over 3 decades agitated for a change of the country's system of government because they were feeling that things were not right. And let's go to the next screen. The reasons why they wanted this change was because there was dissatisfaction with a highly centralized model of governance, unequal resource distribution, ethno-regional development disparities, marginalization of some communities, and most importantly, failure to involve the populace in governance process. Previously, the government would do what the government would want to do. We were just beneficiaries of gifts from the government. Let's go to the next screen. So due to those factors, Kenya published a new constitution on the 27th of August 2010. We call it the Constitution of Kenya 2010. The Nerve Center is a devolved government system made up of 1 national government and 47 county governments. That is when now we entered into the era of devolution. This creation of devolved governments seriously reduced the conflicts that had all along existed as citizens competed for resources from the central administration. It, however, has not completely eliminated the challenge. There is still a challenge existing, simply because as much as we created this we are still in the process of devolving some functions and some resources. The central government still wants to keep holding. In the following general election, the implementation of the devolved system of government began in March 2013. Let's move on to the next slide. In that constitution of Kenya 2010, democracy, public participation, and inclusiveness were meant or enshrined as principles of good governance. So for any public officer to undertake a public duty, the three are among many others that are supposed to be observed. People are supposed to be allowed to make a popular decision from their own will, free will. They are supposed to actively also be able to participate in the decision making, and everybody should feel part of the process. Let's go to the next one. Now, that was the background. Now, let's come to the current scenario where what is the opinion of the public on the current public participation in the national and the county governments? At the national government, majority of the citizens believe that public participation at the national level has for a long time been exclusive and only done for compliance. One of the main complaints is that national government public engagement initiatives receive minimal publishing and publicity. When they undertake publicity, which is very rare, they often seem to have a specific audience in mind. The populace believes there is much that may be done to enhance public participation at the national level. We have the National Assembly at the national level, and we have the national government. The national government has policies to pass or to legislate, and the National Assembly has also bills to work on. Many times, people will just hear about them being done at the National Assembly, even when some of the issues should have been consulted, or the citizens should have been consulted directly. So the general populace has a feeling that at the national level, they are very minimally involved. How about the county governments? The situation appears to be slightly better at the county government level. Majority of the county governments have passed laws, regulations, and policies promoting public engagement. Many county administrations are put in place public engagement mechanisms all the way down to the villages. It is a healthy sign of a rise in public participation in the counties, whether it is out of compliance or on purpose, but it is happening. If you move around, you're realizing that at least there are meetings discussing government agenda, even at the village levels. Let's go to the next one. What are the challenges facing public participation, especially in the counties? Because conversation and decision making and participants will be paid. It has gone. There's thinking that when people go for public participation, they should receive a token, which eventually tries to defeat the actual purpose of public participation, because public participation should be done as free will. You are giving your input about how the expenditure of public resources should be done. If you're given a token, it means you're being coerced into passing a thinking of another person. There is lack of shared knowledge, breeds the public negative attitude of apathy. Some government officers do not want to create that connection with the citizen, and it leads to apathy. So many people do not come for these public participations. Language and literacy, especially in the low literacy areas, you realize public participation is not meaningful. There is also the difficulty in obtaining information, especially from the government. There is something we call elite capture. For example, if in a local electoral area, we have a politician The politician will want to capture the public participation to ensure that what is in his mind is what goes through and suppresses the wills of the majority. There is also another aspect. Public participation is very expensive. So the high cost of public participation, there is inadequate representation of certain community groups. For example, people living with disabilities, youth, children, all these aspects. There is timeline constraints. Our constitution gives timelines on what should be done when. And if a particular government officer is late in trying to put these things in due time, you realize they will rush up a public participation, making sure that the citizen will not give his citizens' voice will not be heard. The communities believe that the government does not comprehend their problems. There is a feeling in the community that government does not understand their problems. And public consultations by the county government, executive and assembly are occasionally not decentralized enough. So you realize they have not taken them down to the grassroots. Let's go to the next one. What are the counties doing to mitigate these challenges? There are some counties, and generally every kind should increase the quantity and the quality of civic education. There's need to increase the quality and the quantity. You do a lot of civic education and give quality civic education so that people can really understand their role in governance. Counties must comply with the Access to Information Act, Proactive Disclosure Provision 2016. We have an act in the country that demands that public officers should be able to disclose any information to the citizen who wants it. So when you're going to do for public participation, all information regarding what you are discussing should be provided. The need of including a variety of community groups should be addressed in county public participation laws. There should be put a minimum that if a forum does not include this particular group, then it is not legal. We should include everybody. A variety of approaches and opportunities for input must be included in public involvement planning to ensure that those who are not allied, those who are not up to particular levels, can also participate through other means. Where, when possible, county administration should translate information in the local language and make it available in simplified ways or formats. County governments should provide areas for interaction and schedule their days for public participation far in advance. County administration would provide for citizen participation at more localized levels, preferably at the village level. Partnership interaction rather than adversarial interaction strategy between county governments, CSOs, and residents should be applied. Let's go to the next one. In conclusion, when you discuss with the other directors of public participation and what they're feeling, the most important things that the government should do, the government should work, make it simple, should make public participation simple and practical for everyone to participate. They should try to simplify public participation. We don't need those complicated forums where only the highlight can participate. We want public participation that we call them mama boga here, the low-level women who sell groceries at the village, who should be able to participate at that local level and have their voice heard. The administration should make efforts to establish meaningful two-way dialogue with the populace. There should be an open channel at every point where the government can speak to the citizen and the citizens can speak to the government. The government should provide incentives for citizens to engage. By incentives, we're not talking about tokens, but every preceding public participation should have given value to the citizen for them to come to the next one. But if they feel the preceding one was a waste of time, there is likelihood that citizens will abscond the next public participation. The government should develop more function and resources to the counties. Challenges being heard from the counties is that we cannot afford this one. We cannot afford this one because we have meager resources. These resources are still being held at the national level where there is very little public participation. So if they brought more resources to the county governments, we believe that the county governments will be able to engage the citizens more meaningfully. Go to the next one. I think I'm done my presentation. So, asanteni sana, that in Kenya is meaning thank you very much for listening to me. We are privileged and we feel privileged to have been part of this process.
Thank you very much to you, Kyalo. I will mute you now. Thank you so much for these very interesting presentations. And it's wonderful to hear some bird song in the background there. We're sitting here in snowy Sweden and really enjoying the summer sounds. But it is interesting to hear the overlaps also between the practice and the research. As one thing, I noted the importance of having simple ways to participate for the citizens, whereas the people organizing these forums need to make it very complex and to see a very deep analysis before making it simple for the actual citizens to then participate. But I have some questions for you. I also want to hear what you have learned from doing this research in a joint matter of engaging with each other between researcher and local governments and what you have learned in the process of that. But before we go to that, I think we had some questions in the chat that we can start by. There was one, let's see, Monica, you had a question about civil society engagement. Would you like to elaborate your question yourself?
It was just, I just found, I thought it was very interesting, the presentation. So thank you for that, first of all. And I'm working as an evaluator, so I'm working a lot with democracy evaluation and politics and politicians trying to influence good outcomes in society. But when I do that, we often run into the sometimes conflicting situation that there is between civil society and politics and politicians. And sometimes politicians don't understand that civil society organizations are very important for local development. And the civil society, on the other hand, on the organizations, they say, we don't want to have anything to do with politics. So we don't want to, something like what you said about the Lebanese answers. This is politics, so we really don't want to talk about that. It's not, this is not what we're talking about now. So I'm just curious about these, you were talking about alternative avenues and things like that. If that has something to do with, can those alternatives avenues sometimes, Hanna, be, can you find them in civil society? Are there civil society organizations or movements? I'm just curious. Thank you.
Should I answer directly, or do you want to take a few questions?
I think we'll go one by one.
Okay. Thank you for this question. Yes, I think the alternative avenues are very interesting, and they're an interesting thought experiment because they kind of contradict what we think that we know about democracy. And particularly Lebanon and Lebanese municipalities, they're very small. So Lebanon is a small country in itself. It has over 1,000 municipalities. So you can imagine the size of at least some municipalities. Of course, it varies a lot. But they are quite small, and even if they're not, they don't have, because of the lack of decentralization, they also don't have that many resources. So local governments have an official mandate through elections and so on, but they do not really have that much administrative powers. So to a large extent, they rely on working with the civil society and the local actors that exist. In some cases, I see direct connections. So the kind of politics and civil society are directly connected. For example, several of the municipal councillors that I interviewed for my PhD work, they were involved in civil society directly, civil society actors engaging in politics. So there we actually see quite a disconnect. But it's also because local politics are considered less political than the national level. So the national level is very much about, in Lebanon, it's, I mean, we can even drag it up to the international level, those who are affiliated with Syria and Iran against those who are affiliated or closer to the West and maybe Saudi Arabia. So those are the politics that they don't want to talk about. Alternative avenues, I think they open up if local issues are not considered as contested. And especially for these women who are in municipal council, they are seen as being heavily involved in local development. And kind of the more social part of local development, being engaged in NGOs that deal with healthcare, that deal with education, those issues that are considered less political in a sense. So yes, they can be civil society actors, and seeing that interconnection between them, even if it's not politics as politics are played out on the national scale, I think is really important and interesting. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did, and it opens a lot of, there are lots of thoughts in my head and probably in your head also about civil society and the importance of civil society and the possibility of supporting civil society without intervening with politicians and politics and not making it a contested arena. So it's really interesting what the opportunities are with strengthening civil society organizations, or like doing that, but not in a political way. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you to both. And we have a very interesting question from Gareth in the chat, and we also know that Ingvar has a question. But first, I want to give the floor to Jean-Bosco as one of the researchers. It would be interesting to hear your input in this. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Clara. I think I just wanted to add on what Hanna just said on the same question of civil societies and actors, especially for Monica, who is studying the things related to civil society and how they collaborate with government institutions. Yeah, I think the main question that I faced as doing my PhD was also related to that differentiation between politicians or politics and also civil societies and generally other actors. And my research actually came up with another concept that we all know probably, which is about brokers. And the brokers, which is a lot to do with brokerage relationships, kind of going beyond what we call like differentiation between different actors. It's really very difficult to see the difference between the actors. So to the extent that civil societies are generally related also to politicians, probably Mutiso from Kenya will say that it is very difficult to say that we can look at civil society in the conventional terms, like they are just civil societies, they are civil, they have nothing to do what is going on, apart from just advocating for the good of the people, as if they are neutral to every political aspects of things. So brokerage was also another term that came up, because at the end of the day, you find all together working in a relationship that can go beyond the civility that we conventionally know. So probably we keep pushing our reflections to see, but still civil societies remain clearly actors that we see on the ground, that we can rely on as much as what we are talking about is concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I was reading your question in the chat, Gareth, and I'm wondering if you want to tell it to us verbally.
Sure, thanks, Laura, and thanks everyone, Hanna, Jean-Bosco, and our colleagues in Kenya, Augustine. A really interesting presentation. Thank you. I wanted to ask a bit about, but maybe, so I didn't put that in terms of the comparison between Lebanon and Kenya. Obviously, you as researchers, you came together to look at this. But I'm particularly interested in following that conversation about civil society, how comparable they are. So obviously, one of the things that came out in Augustine's presentation is that the local governments in Kenya are not local; they're county. They're regional government. They are legislative assemblies. They produce laws. They're not local government, and so they're massively entrenched within the national politics, which is, in terms of the new constitution, absolutely great for devolving from the winner takes all at the national level. However, they're not local government. So if they're not local government and none of the counties are enacting they all have the ability to enact a local government law. None of them have done this yet. So to what extent are we able to talk about and engage with county governments pretending they're local governments? We're the International Centre for Local Democracy. We're not promoting local democracy if we're not challenging the local counties to enact their local government laws. So I was interested in how, particularly this comparative piece of work, Hanna and Jean-Bosco was able to maybe get down to that level of where there isn't space at the sub-county level in terms of local democracy. Thanks.
That is an excellent question, and has been a challenge for this research. Partly because, yes, they are very different. Lebanon is a very, very small country. Kenya is a very, very big country. And the size of the county versus the municipality, they differ a lot. Also because as we set out to do this project, our ambition was to do actual field work and to do much more participatory field work. We got the funding and the contract ready, I think it was mid-March, and about a week later, everything closed down. So you can imagine like the reshuffling and rethinking and yeah, the changes we had to make. And in the end, I am a bit sad to say that it did not become as participatory and as locally engaged as we were hoping for in the beginning. But then I think Bosco could actually be able to answer your question more in relation to Kenya and in relation to county, because also from his PhD, his research is much more localized in a way, and the counties are only part of that. So I'll leave the floor to Jean-Bosco.
Thanks, Hanna. I also thank you very much for this question. Actually, it is a question that even Mutiso would very much like to contribute to, but from the time when I was doing my PhD, the sub-counties existed, and my idea was to base my study at the county level, and the counties were kind of bigger entities divided into sub-counties and then going down to the people. It was very structured. But later on, the idea of the county was dropped, and the things became different. But for now, I could say that during our study, we actually didn't really focus much on going to beyond the counties, because the only level we could achieve with our limited capabilities to go down to the field was to only rely on the county assemblies. So by getting ideas from the county assemblies, and also going beyond, was to only link to the civil societies that could actually give us more than the county perspectives. So the idea could have been better if we went down and really did as I did for my PhD, because I went beyond the counties, went down to the civil societies, to the sub-counties, and even down to the level of the wards and the local citizens in practice. So that is what we couldn't do with this research. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for those responses. And now we don't have much time left. I want to give the floor to Ingvar, and please be brief, I think, in the last question and responses to be respectful of everyone's time, but please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Ingvar Rönnbäck. I'm living in Sweden and I'm working with several county governments. Also done so with Machakos County government in several projects from partners in the county of Västerbotten in Sweden. I would like to ask, I guess it's mostly Augustine, about the relations between the county governments and the people at the ward and village level. It seems like that you have put in place a lot of meetings and forums that has been possible to develop after the devolution. But what about the outcome and feedback from the county governments to the wards and villages for us to understand a bit more about the quality of the democracy? Because whose voice is being heard at the local level? And how do you select what should be politically prioritized? Do you have any systems for documentation? And how open and transparent is the processes in the county governments for the people to understand what is done with this information? So that would be of interest for me to know a bit more about. So thank you. I hope the question is understandable.
Can I answer, Clara? Well, thank you. First of all, hi, my friend Higva. How are you?
I am fine.
Let me begin by saying the system in Kenya, devolution and decentralization was done in a very structured way. We have 47 counties, and depending on the size of the county, it has several number of wards. Each ward has got a number of villages. And even the villages have got what we call home clusters. For every single undertaking the government is supposed to undertake, it should be lying in a particular home cluster area, inside a particular ward, inside the county. Or even decision is being made, it should be affecting people living in a particular home cluster area, in a particular ward, inside the county. At the county level, we have the executive and the county assembly. Each ward is represented by a member of county assembly. The challenge in our system of public participation is the executive engages the citizen directly. But then it comes and develops the technical document that has got the input of the citizens, collected through tools that have been made by the Directorate of Citizen Engagement. Then now we have the experts who come up with a technical document. But this technical document has to go to the county assembly where we have politicians sitting there. And each of these politicians comes from a local ward. There are cases where there is conflict between what the politician who sits in the county assembly wants and what the citizen want. But the person with the key to pass this document is the politician. So eventually all trust to suit what they want. Then they will go, the county assembly does what we call citizen feedback. They'll go down to the village and explain to the citizens why they tend to halter. In most cases, when they halter, they will give non-existing reasons for the alteration. They could quote and say the county executive did not have enough resources. That is the reason why we are not doing a dam, we are doing a borehole, which could not be the case. And because the citizen, the grassroots cannot come and verify whether that was the truth, you realize that's the reason why we said sometimes elites try to hijack public participation because the structure, it has been done. But in most other cases where there are no interests of the politician, most of what we have collected from the citizen passes through all the way to the planning documents. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And our time is running out, has run out, as a matter of fact. And just as a final little question for all of you, I would like to ask you to share a key takeaway from today in your capacity as researcher, as subnational body, or as any capacity you are hearing today. Let's start with you, Bosco.
Yeah, my take is that I mean, one can say a lot of things, but the one thing that I learned along the process is that the local area is very messy. One can think that things are clear and things can be done easily, but there are many differences and many things to consider when one is on the field. Thank you.
Thank you. Augustine.
Let me first of all appreciate Hanna and Bosco for their effort. It's really a very big insight into what we are really experiencing down here. Their research will go a long way in trying to help us try to fix a few areas. If this research was shared with the right consumers, the people who are mentoring up with the public participation, maybe it would go a long way in trying to make public participation more meaningful and more inclusive to the benefit of the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Final words, Hanna?
I appreciate this opportunity to share and to get inputs here, Augustine's reflections in relation to his work, but also the questions that have been posed here. I think my main takeaway is that we need more time to discuss this. That there's so many things and nuances, and as Jean-Bosco was saying, the messiness of the local, that we need, it's no simple answer. And we need to talk about this, and we need to look at the issue from different perspectives. I think that would be my main takeaway. So thank you so much for today.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all who participated and who listened and who asked and who engaged with this. And from our side, from ICLD's side, I have to say that a main takeaway is that this forum and these discussions are a crucial part of the research that we fund and that we facilitate as a way to connect research with practice and as a way to gather input from experts from various fields and capacities. And it is very much not complete without these types of discussions. So thanks to everyone. This recording will be uploaded on YouTube, so it will be available publicly. And you can always get in touch with us if you have any questions, further comments, or if you want to get in touch and continue the discussion at another day, another time. We will be happy to facilitate any follow-up on this. I also want to say that all the publications related to this research are available on ICLD's website under the Knowledge Bank. And I really do recommend both the research report and the policy brief connected to it. So with those words, a very happy Easter to those who celebrate that. And to everyone, a very lovely day. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.